Okay, so this week we're going to look at the forms and input, and mostly using the checkout forms as an example. And so this is where we stopped 2 weeks ago, and last week we mostly covering the Git. And then the week before that, we starting to build our online pet shop store. And this is where we stopped. And so we created a product page currently, which only shows one product, which is cat food with some description, price, and an add to cart button. And also, we said the add to cart button will be disabled, and once there's no more stock left. Also, we have created a checkout button and at the top that allows the user to switch between the product and shopping cart page. And so the user will click once, it goes to the checkout page, and click again, they go back to the product page. Okay, and we just starting on the checkout page, and essentially when we go to the checkout page, we only have the empty space. There's nothing there yet. So today we're going to add more to the checkout page. And so we'll create something similar to this, and maybe not as well formatted as this. We're just adding all these different fields onto the checkout page. And so here, user can enter details, for example, name or address. And I don't think we're going to add that many details, but if you know how to add name and add address or city, and should be very similar. And also we need to do a quick check to ensure the details are correct. For example, if we want to use a enter zip code or phone number, we know those are numbers. It should not be letters in there, except for the UK, the zip code actually has letters. Okay, and also we're going to be introducing, or actually, discovering more details about some of these view directives. We came across these before, and particularly vmodel, and vmon, and vbind, and I think maybe the first and the second or the third, probably starting the third lecture when we did the introduction or showed a simple example of view. We actually already used some of these, but now we're going to discuss them in more details. And also we're using v4, and which is a loop, and which is very handy when you want to display a list of things. You don't want to repeat that for each single items manually. And we also talk a little bit about the modifiers. And okay, I'm going to start with vmodel. Then vmodel is where when we need to get some information from the page, especially usually this is like the input field, user needs to type in something. So previously, you can do this with just JavaScript. You can say document.getElement by ID and followed by the ID of the input field, which is a text field, which is the input element, and then with a type text, and then dot value, which will give you the actual things user typed in. Okay, and then as we showed before, and Vue.js has a directive called vmodel, and make these things a little bit easier. And so it makes it easier in terms of you need to write less code, but also easier. And when you need to bind, kind of connect a text field with a variable you define in Vue. Okay, and vmodel works with all the different input forms, including text box and text areas, which is a larger box. You can type in longer text, and checkbox, radio buttons, or drop-down menus. And yeah, personally, I'm not a big fan of drop-down menus, and it's in terms of usability, it's not the most usable, especially I think you all tried on some page has a very long drop down list. It's just not easy to find the things you want to, for example, to select a country from a list of more than 100 countries, and not the most user-friendly way to do that. But anyway, we're going to cover that just as an example. Okay, and first we want to emphasize, and then the V model allows you to bind a variable in the view. This will be in the data component or data property of the view with some input fields on the page or in the HTML section. And this bind is two-way. That means if user makes some changes on the HTML page or in your app, that change will be reflected in your view directly or immediately. And similarly, if you change the same, change the view variable in the data in your view code somehow, and that will affect on the interface as well. So that's what it meant by two-way binding. That means if you change one side, the other side will change as well. Okay, and so if the user made some changes by entering some text or select the value on the HTML page or your app, and then the view property will change. And in the other way, when you change the value in the view, for example, you set the view variable to a different value, then the values in the HTML input elements will also change as well. Okay, and so if you want to do one-way binding, you can use something called V1s, but in most cases we're going to be using V model, which is more convenient. Okay, and things might get a little bit confusing now, and because we also mentioned the V-bind before, and which is also about binding, and we also use the binding when we're describing the features of V model. Okay, and so the V model is mostly used for input and form binding. So you have some text field and drop-down list, and in your app or on the interface that you want to get the value, this is when you use V model. Yeah, and later you will see in the examples, we're going to use V model and to bind the text input on the checkout page to a variable or to a view variable. Okay. And then the V bind is a bit different in the sense it's used to bind HTML elements. So if you remember the examples we did before is we can bind the value to the disabled property of the button element, then it will change that value either true or false. Then we can use that to control whether the button is disabled or not. So here we're not really getting any input from the user. It's just changing the property of the HTML element. So this is when you use vbind. Okay, and another example we did before is actually we can change the source attribute of the image tag, and they'll give it different values, and you can load different pictures, essentially changing the pictures on the app, in the app. Okay, and also another example is you can actually use vbind to change the class attribute of an element, for example, a div. And this is the way you can actually changing the formatting of an element, and you can give it different CSS class, and those formatting rules will be applied to a particular element. So you can change the looks and feels of the an HTML element this way. For example, you can make a button having or text have different colors. Okay, as I said, so for user input, something user typed in or select, and you use V model. If you want to change an element, HTML element in some way, and this is when you use vbind. Okay, and this is simple examples of using vModel and similar to the one we saw before. Okay, so first, you need to create an HTML element that will be bound to, and using the vModel, and indicate, in this case, will be input, just called input. Okay, and then you say vModel and equal to something. And so this should be a variable defined in the view. Sorry, just give me the second. To close the blinds. Currently can't really see now. Yeah, okay, that's much better. Okay, so you can see here, we had the input element, and that will be linked to all the dot last name. So this will be a variable defined in the view. I assume in the data property, you would have an object called order, and in that particular object, it has a property called last name. And this way it will bind or link and whatever the input field and ordered last name. Okay, yeah. So this is linked to, and then the other things, and you need to, it's a bit different than the standard HTML. You can see here, and we actually didn't quite specify what the input would be like. Usually you have to say input type equal to text, which give you a text field, or specify a different type address. These are things we can still do. Okay, and now this comes the coding part, and let's actually start the coding, live coding now. I'm gonna exit this one and still keep it there. I'm gonna open the demo. Where did it go? The code. Let me just quickly check. Oh, that's already done. Images. Should be this one. Store. Check out. That's already with everything in there. Okay, these are all the ones. Let me get the one from last week. No, sorry. It has to be the. Okay, and we'll use one of these, and it's all more or less the same. Copy over these here. We don't have to redo everything we did before. Okay. Let me open the code in the Visual Studio Code now. Okay, and so this will be the code where we stopped 2 weeks ago. So this is what it will look like. We had a very simple app, currently only has one product, and you can add something to the checkout when it's 5 or stop. This is disabled. And you click the checkout button, it goes to the checkout page, and which is currently empty. That's why we're going to build more now, and you click it again, go back to the actual, sorry, to the product list. Okay, and so now we're gonna adding something to the turn these off, close these extra windows. Okay, yeah. And so you can see the first thing is we're going to go to the checkout page and we can add an input field, and which is the first name. So that's the first name of the people making the order, and last name. And so what we did is say we put each input field in a paragraph, so they will have its own. So it always starts from to the left, and then this is more like the label for the input field, and not the best way, but at least something you can do. And so it just shows usually the better way is actually to set as a label element and link that to the input field. I'm being slightly lazy here. And so here you can see now we're actually using the V model, and which allows you to link whatever is entered in this input to this variable defined in the view, and which will be the first name property of the order objects. So we're going to do that part later. Okay. And so these are two fields. And what you can also see here is we're going to using those two fields, which are defined here, and which is linked to the view variable. So as soon as you start typing in the input field, here the display would change, because user start entering here, and this variable would change as user type. You don't have to do anything like the event handler, and as this change, and the value here would also change. So this is one of the better. So this is one of the things nicer in the view compared to just using standard JavaScript. And if you want to test these things, for example, and update the page as user type, and it's not as easy to do as what you can do here in view. Okay, and so we're going to go back to here. Going to close the list. So we have close the list to have a bit more space to do. So we need to find the part which is our checkout page. Yeah, so which is here. Okay, so what I can do, I'm going to collapse the other part. So we just focus on this. Okay, and that's a bit too much. At least I can hide this part. So now I'm focusing on this part, which is only do the checkout. And you can see we first have a paragraph, and inside we have a strong, and we also need the input. Okay, and in the strong we say first name. Does this do automatic formatting? No. It says this okay. Okay, and for this input, go back here. So for the input field, what we want, and we don't need to type it to text, what we want is we want to link that to our view variables. So using V model, in this case, we call order dot first name. Okay. Okay, and currently we don't have that yet, or we can have a quick look. So in the view, we have defined the product, but that's it. We don't have order yet. So something we have to create a little bit later on. Excuse me. Okay, and go back here. And now we're creating the second. First is strong, and then plus the input. Okay, for the strong, this time we're going to do a last name. And then input is again the same. I'm going to link that to using V model equal to order dot last. Okay, and obviously, as I said, these are not working yet. We're going to change the view part a little bit later on. Now we come to this part, and which will show the information as user typed in. So we're going to do in H3. Let's call this order information, and and first name. And if you don't remember, this double curly bracket is the equivalent of V text. But the advantage, besides typing slightly less, is the V text you have to use here, or VHTML. Whereas using double curly bracket, you can mix the values from or variables from the view together with some static text, with, for example, first name. Okay, and so we're going to display these here straight away as user type. Last name. Okay, double curly bracket. Order dot last name. Okay, and now if we check our page, I haven't used that yet, and I should use the preview, live preview, for example, using external browser. So it should open up here and make it slightly smaller. Oh, if I click checkout, it doesn't work. And that's probably because the errors. And if I go inspect, go bottom, close this, you can see there's 10 errors. And so this one complaining about favicon icon, that's fine. And it says property or method order is not defined. Okay, that is error, which we know. But also, and because this error, the rest of the view code is not working as well either. So if I click checkout, and this now doesn't go into the checkout page, it doesn't switch. Okay, so we have to fix these now. Okay, and back to lecture. So obviously, the easiest thing is just to add the order object in the view data property, and then this will link with these V models, these input fields as well. And here you can also display them on the page as well. That's quite easy. So I'm going to do that now. So let's go to our script part and have our data. So that's the shopping cart. And after that, I'm going to do something called order, or something new. This is an object. And obviously to include all the information about order. So the first name and the last name will be just the first two things. Should be added more there. Oh, if you see these curly red lines, that means there's a problem. And sometimes it's actually the line before rather than the line itself. This line causing the problem. In this case, I forgot a comma to separate different properties or different keys in a JSON object. Okay, and this should fix it now. And so if we go back here and we show the developer tools again. Okay, you can see console now is happy. There's no more errors. And if we click checkout, okay, now you can see we now have the text field with some labels in front and some name here. And if we start typing here, and you can see here it's already displaying. I missed the one. Okay, so I type my name here. I typed in something else there. Okay, and you can see So these can show in real time as user typed in. And just to show quickly, you can also do the other way around, and you can change the values in view, and then these fields will change as well. So to do that, we're going to using the view developer tools, which now should recognize, okay, we have the view instance, and we had all the objects and have some inside all the objects, there's a property called last name, and I can change that value to something else. So actually, I'm going to make it a proper name. Yeah, it doesn't allow me
The quotation marks, I think, missing.
Does it have to be? I did, or have to be double quote? Very strict. So you can change it here, and you can see on the page now, and the last name values is also changed. So that's the two-way binding, and you can write some code to change the values of these in your view, and then here will change as well. Okay, and so that part is working. So this way we can a little bit easier to get particular values user typed in the form, but also you can use it straight away as user type, which will be much harder to do using plain JavaScript.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, sir, like I've tried one thing. So basically, like for the final submission, we have to add like 4 products, like 5 products. So product cards, right? So basically, like for the 5 product cards, I was trying to use for loop to create that thing. So when I was editing, one card, when I was writing something on word card, it was doing the same on the other cards. You get me? So like, can we use some sort of loop to create a 5 other cards? Because we did this thing last year using the loop. We have create product card using the loop, or we have to write the same code 5 times.
Yes, we'll cover that later when we go to V4, which is
Okay.
which does exactly that, which shows the product information using the same loop. You don't have to write many different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Keys for each product.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back here. Yeah, so we've done this part. So now we can save the first name and the last name in the view, which should be quite straightforward. And also we've seen this one already. I showed in the demo. You can do this update in real time as you typed in here, and the name will update in real time. Obviously, and this interface looks a bit nicer, has a bit more formatting, and the layout changes, and which we'll not do in the live demo. And you can do that for your coursework, and you will not lose mark if you don't. I don't get any extra mark either.
Sir?
Yeah.
Where did we disable the show product button where you clicked on the card and then disable the HTML?
Which one do you mean?
So when you add the cart, when you click on the cart, it hides the page. Where is that in the code? When you click on the checkout page, it hides the picture and everything.
This one?
Yeah, where is the code that does that?
That was done 2 weeks ago in the lecture, 2 weeks ago, week 4 lecture.
Okay.
Yeah. That was covered there, and have a look, and it also should be in lecture slides there as well. Okay, so so now we are adding some other fields, and this is just to show you different type of input you can use. So these two, and first the address and the city, and these are very similar. You can add first, last name, then you can definitely add address and city. They are just another text input field. And this one is slightly different. So we are using a drop-down list. So so you can see we're using a select element, it's not input. And we still bind that to a view HTML element. And then these are the options of your drop-down list. And finally, we have a zip code. Okay, and so I will still do these, and if it's take too long, I might skip some. Let me see, how are we doing in terms of time? Where I think there's the slides. Okay, and let's just create, and because I was thinking, should I include the address and city, because these are really no different than from the first name, last name at all. P plus strong, sorry. Inside have a strong plus input. Okay, and so what this does is says, I want to create the P element. Inside the P, I will have a strong, and the next after that, which is what the plus is for, I had the input element. And now I need to get that back. And for the strong, I would say address. And here we're going to bind that to the model. I'm going to bind that into the order dot address. Obviously, we need to create these later on and add these in the view data properties. So the order object, they actually have address property. P strong, and then input again. So for the strong, the second one is city, and in the input, we're going to bind this to, and using the model, the dot city. Okay, we can have a quick look of the page. We go check out now. Excuse me. Now we have this one here. Obviously, we put it at the wrong place and put it after. They should be before the order information. So I'm gonna take these out. I'll put it here and save. And go check out here. Okay, now looks better. The first name, last name, address, and city. Okay, and this part, it will be slightly different and maybe more interesting. And user has a option to select one of the states. And it's usually a different input element, which is select. Strong select. And then inside select, I want to use option element. I want 5 of these. Yeah, so I times 5. Okay, and so we do state and the select. Again, we're not using any of these. All we're doing is just says v model. I'm gonna bind this to my order object, the state property. Okay, and the first one, I will just say disabled and value equal to empty. So this one is saying, so that will be the default value when it does not select any state, basically. We're not selecting any state, that will be this option. Okay, I'm gonna do some other things here. I don't need these values, so I can create all these together. Delete all these one, just the option, and then do AL, AR. I actually can't, and so these are like the acronyms or short names for different US states. I don't recognize CA, which is California. I don't really know any of the others. Okay, and finally we have one, which is P strong, and then input. So I'm gonna say strong. This one is zip code, and the V model. We're gonna bind this to order.zip. Okay, and obviously, if I go the page now here, and this is not gonna work. Oh, okay, it's working now. I'm a bit surprised. I thought they will be complaining again about those properties we haven't defined. So we haven't defined the state or zip code in the view yet, but it seems to allow me to do that anyway today. Okay. Okay, and back to the slides. We'll go next. Okay. So what it's doing now, and it's also displaying all these information, and in terms of the address, the city, the zip, and code under the order information section. So previously we only had the first and last time, so we want to display all the other information as well as the user typed in. So it would look like this, as I add some information above, and this part or the information would automatically update. Okay. So currently we haven't added the new fields to the data yet. So for example, we haven't add city or zip or state, but however, you can already use them. For example, zip. So let's try this. If we go to my code, even I haven't have an order.zip, and I can potentially, oops, I think I did it again. Yeah, the state and zip code should be above the order information. Already display this one there, and let's give it a try. So P, and I want to show the zip code, and I want to order.zip. Go here. You can see here, and I can try to type in something here, and you can see actually already displaying there. Okay, and the reason we can do this is because Vue implicitly adds these new property for you. So as you define these things, and it will automatically add these one. And the reason when we actually first try order.firstName and order.lastName doesn't work is because order object does not exist yet at that time. So once we had order, it can automatically or implicitly to add these for you. But obviously, and this usually is not a good practice, and you can do it, but it's much better you do this explicitly in your code. You define these different properties. Okay, and so that's what we will do now. We can add all these properties and to the order objects that have the address, city, zip code, and state. Okay, so we're going to be good. So we're going to have address, city, zip code, the state. Yeah, okay. And I'm gonna just check again. So I shouldn't expect anything different now.
For city, it needs a Y in order.
Ah, yes, thank you. City. Okay, and so I shouldn't see anything any different here. And if I type in something, it should work. Okay, and that's also something I would highly recommend. And every time you make some changes and do test it out in the browser or just try to run it to see if there's anything error. And if there's something you know, it's what you did in the last, say, a couple of minutes, which caused error, so you can fix it. Rather than say, type lots of code and then test it. And then you would be much harder to find out the source or the cause of the error. Okay, and here we're just adding more different input. So this time we're adding the checkbox and the radio button. So the checkbox will be, say, allow customer to ship as a gift, and the radio button is to choose which address is it shipped to, whether it be home or business. And this is really just to demonstrate how to use different type of input. Okay, and so for the for the radio button, we must set the V model in both checkbox to the same value. Okay, and so you can see for the radio button, you have two input. So essentially you have two options and you have two input type or equal to radio, and both of them have to be bind to the same properties in view. So you can get both, or you only one will be selected. Then whichever is selected, the values can be get view. If you only have one, when the other option is selected, then the view would not get the values if it doesn't have the V model there. Okay, and let's go back to the code. So we go back to the input part. Okay, we're gonna do P, and then input, and plus a label. Okay, and the input, this time we're gonna have a type now, which will be called the checkbox. So ID equal to, I'm not sure if it's required. Actually, it might leave it for now. Value equal to true, that means by default it will be selected, and the model would equal to order.gift. So that will link to our view property. Let me wrap the lines. Okay, label, like in for, so you need gift. So this is the proper way to add a label. So you can see here, I first have the input field. Let me just do the line first. You can see here, I'm defining a checkbox. I'll call it ID equal to gift. It's not the best one, it doesn't matter. And then here I had a label and it says for gift. So here the gift meant to be gift here. So then the HTML knows this label is for this input element. So these two will be linked together. And the effect will be if you click on the label, it actually would change the checkbox value as well. You don't have to click on the checkbox itself. And it will say shift as a gift. Okay, so that's that. The next one will be the radio button. Okay, so that's slightly more complicated. We have an input, and then it also has a label. As I said before, this label will be linked to the particular and radio option. Okay, and I have to do this twice. Let me see if I can do input and the label, and then twice. Oh, I recognized. So it's what to input plus label, input plus label. Okay. Auto format, no. And format document, yeah. Okay, it doesn't format this one. So I have to do this manually. And so we had input and has a label for this input. And we have a second input and the label for that input. And finally, closing the paragraph. So the first input, this type here will be as my first option for the radio button. G equal to home. So this is where the label for will say, or labels for home. And its value equal to home. And this is second home will be the text showing as option on the page. So it will show that's the home. And finally, we are binding this to our view all, it's called order dot method. Okay. Okay, so the label would just say home. And the same for this one. And second one will be also radio ID or equal to business value or equal to business. Sorry, and this is a value that is the viewer will get when they use the select option. And actually, the text shown on the page will be the label here. Okay, and the model equal to order dot method. Okay, and the other thing we already mentioned before is for these two inputs, and they need to bind to the same view variable property. Okay, and this is saying this is for business, and the text that can display here will be business. Okay, and now we go here and to checkout. So we have this checkbox button. It will show you whether this shipped as gift or not. And if we go to the view, we have to open, doesn't open directly. View, what if I put it on the side? And click the root, and you can see there's order. It doesn't have that one yet, but if I choose this, and it automatically give you this property added one, and I can also choose one of these, and you can see the method, and because we link that to, where did we link to? Yeah, order.method, so that will be either business or home. And this is the value which you set here. Whereas that text is what the label does. Okay, and so that seems to be working. And so I think we should do this explicitly as well. So we need one for method and the other one for gift. order.gift. Yeah. Okay. That should do it now. Yeah. Hopefully it's all happy and no errors. How are we doing in terms of time? Halfway through, hopefully. Okay. So as we mentioned, you can change the values in view, which will affect the display on the page. So this way, and give you a way to set the default values. So if the view variable does not have an empty value to start with, then that will be entered in the text field by default. Okay, and for example, you can set the method to home as default and gift to false as default. Then these will be displayed on the page as default value. Go back here. Okay. So we're going to just give it some values here and gift. So by default will be false. And then let's say the default. Say default code is 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we click it, check out, you can see this is unticked, home is selected here, and zip code has 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so you can use the initial values and in the view to set these up. Obviously, user can still change this, and you can change the order. Now I change the method to business now, and I select. These all can still be changed without problem. Okay, and now, and the last thing is the place order button. And after user entering everything, and you need the button and actually to place the order. And usually what you would do is actually you would do the check first, and before actually say either processing the order or display a message. But first we need a button, and that can trigger all these. Okay, so we all know how to add a button, just using the button or the input type the button in HTML. And then to do the event handler using the view, then we use v-on. In this case, we're going to just run a function called submit form when user is clicked the submit button, oh sorry, the place order button. Okay, and so here the submit form has to be a function defined in the view, and it could be as simple as just say alert order submitted, and so I see something like this. Okay, and it doesn't actually processing the order or charge users to the credit card, but you can potentially add these quite easily, but we'll just do that for now. So we're going to go to first go to the page. We're going to add a button here. We're going to just say button, and then here we say v-on. Click. And the shorthand would be just use a column without anything equal to submit form, and this will be the text on the button. I'll just say place order. Okay, and then now we need to do something. So as we said, has to be in the methods section. This function has to be called submit form, so otherwise you can't find the function when the button is created. Do this here. We're gonna call it submit form. We don't need anything. Input. So all it does is just alert order submitted. Okay, and if we go here, go checkout page, and if I play, now I have this button, so if I click, oops, nothing happened.
The semicolon?
Sorry? I think potentially it's maybe blocked by the browser itself. Or did I submit the form? Okay. What
Do
if I,
semicolon.
sorry?
Do you need to add semicolon there?
No, you don't need. And let's just do console log submitted. So this the second one would type a message in the console. Let me go check out place order. Oh, it doesn't do that.
But don't you think the syntax is wrong for if you go up, the syntax is wrong for the click. It should be like at the rate of and then click.
Ah, is it? Okay. Let's try. Check out place order. Okay, and you can see a little box there say order submitted, and also a message here. Okay, and yeah, and so here and v on the shorthand is at, so the column is for the v binds. Then yeah, I mixed the two, so that's why it was not working, and it's not complaining as well. Okay, and so that's in terms of the V model for the forms. Next, we're going to have a look at the vbind and v4. Let me just check in terms of time. Okay, we're a little bit behind. We only have a less than half an hour left. Okay. Okay, and so this is a small thing, and it's something nice to have, but it's actually not absolutely necessary. And so currently, if we display the values on our page, which for the gift option, which actually we didn't. But if we do, and we can say paragraph and gift, and then order.gift, I think is a order.gift, and then what user would see and is a value either true or false, depends what's selected. Default is false. If I change this, we'll change to true. But sometimes, and you might don't want to see true or false, you want to see yes or no or some other text. And because maybe true or false doesn't make too much sense to the user who may not be a programmer. Okay, and so then a more maybe clear message would be say send as gifts or not send as gift. Okay, and what you can do, and you can do this by changing the return value of the select option using vbind, true value, and vbind false value. Okay, so by default it will return true or false, and now you change it with vbind, essentially just as you change a property of the HTML element. So you say when it's true, I want to return something different. And when it's false, I want to send, instead of just a text false, or just a false value, I want to send us something different. And so you can see we say vbind true value equal to order.sendGift. And here order.sendGift and is a string defined in view. Okay, I'm gonna just do true now, and the same for the false. So we will do that. Will be changing the checkbox. That's the radio button, which will be here. We are doing the checkbox. We have the V model. Okay, and then inside the input itself, we say V bind. Okay, so V bind should be this one then. True value equal to order dot okay, send gift. And you could, I was just thinking, is there any other things? For example, I can call it and just equal to side name, but that's a bit silly. And I will do order dot send gift. So this will be a text string. Sorry, I don't need the order dot. Say send as a gift. Okay, and so now it just depends on what I choose. If I choose send as gift, the false value is still false, but if it's true, and it will send as a gift. And you can also change this to something else as well. A bit silly, I can say, I'm gonna v bind, where is it? Here. That's the other thing. I can call v bind it to site name. So what it will bind is bind to this property in the code. So when it's true, it will say view.js pet store, which is a bit silly. Now if they say false, when it say true, it will say view.js pet store. So basically you can bind the return value to anything you want. Okay, so here it's do the property properly, so it's sending the right text. Okay, and also the binding now for the drop-down menu options, and we created that on the page, and we store the values in the order.state and view property. Okay, and okay. So currently the options in the drop-down is hard-coded, so you have to manually enter these. And it will be better if we can read the list from the data and generate the option dynamically. And so that's much better. For example, you might already get a list of all the American states somewhere. There's like 50, and you don't really want to create these 50 options. And maybe even more complex, you have this list for different countries, and depending on the countries, you have a different list of states. Again, you don't want to manually create for each of these countries a list of states. So where you can use this. Okay, and then you can still use vbind. And apologies, so I think it's a here it's just still changing the return the values. I saw the okay, yeah. Okay, here we're still changing the return the values. And so if we look at what is currently returning, we can just display the we can say zip state state. Okay, and this you go check out, and the state currently nothing is selected. And if you select AL, it will return AL, and AR, it returns AR. Okay, but if what you don't want to return AR, for example, if you want to select the CA And instead of return CA, you want to return, say, California, for example. And similar to the previous ones, you just change the return values of the option, and you can do that using view. Okay, and so what you do is, and you say vbind the value, and they say state.al, then say this states and should be a property in your object in your view, and which would have a property called al, which have a text string. Okay, and the important thing here is we're now using vbind value, whereas previously we're using the vbind true value or false value. So that's for Boolean, so you know exactly there's only these two options here, and for the basically it's a general text string, so it can be any number. So you just say vbind value. And then state.al, and so you can see you need to define the state object in your view, and then for the AR, CA, and V, you give out the 4 names, and these will be returned and be displayed here. Okay, just in the interest of time, I'm not gonna code this part, and it's quite similar to the previous part. Okay, I'll do that anyway, at least one example. So we need to update these options. So here we can set the specific value it needs to return. Or just say we bind the value equal to states.al. And then here in our code, we have to define this option called states, and it should have a, what is AL? Stands for Alabama. Okay. So once we do this, when the user selected this option, it should return, instead of AL, it would return an Alabama, and you can do this for the other states as well. Check out, let's do states. Okay, Alabama, but the other ones I didn't change, so this will be still the options you get from the directory, so CA or NV. Okay, yeah. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the V4 part. So this is the says. So here, actually, we actually can generate these options dynamically. Okay, so actually, I do need the states option there. And so you can see, and this is still the job done option. And we still have the first option, which is the same as before. Now we have here, instead of listing all the states, we're actually using a V4. Okay, and the V4 will iterate through something, and it will be iterated through whatever is behind in. So in this case, it will be in states. And so it will iterate through everything inside this object, in this case, and if it's a JSON object, or iterate through all the key value pairs or the properties of this one. And the state itself will be referred to each of these key value pairs, and sorry, each of the values. And you can also get the key as well, but this has to be put afterwards. The state here is a pseudonym. You can call it something else. You can call it value or something else, up to you. And what you hear is saying v bind value. This is the same as before, which allows you to define the return the value. And here, this state is this state here. So it will bind whatever value that is. And display the key. Key will be the text displayed here. Yeah, and so as we said, the state here is the alias for each element inside the states array. So the key is optional, but we need it because we want to, that's the one we want to display it on the page as option. So we need that part. For the actual v4, you don't really need this. This would still also work. Okay, so for them to do this, I do need the states. I can't really skip it, so I have to do all of this now. So I have to do AL and AR is Arizona, and then CA is California. Yeah. Finally, then V is okay. Now we have the V4. We can change the drop-down menu here. So instead of doing this, I can just comment these out in case we still need that, or you can at least still see that. Okay, I'm gonna do option. Okay, and then we're gonna do the V4 now equal to. So first is the things I want to use. The state is a pseudonym refers to the elements. The key is optional, but usually it's good to have in states. Okay, the states must be matching the name defined here, which is called states. Otherwise, it will not be able to find it. And this refers to the element, essentially is the value after the column. And then this one will be the key. So this more or less is like a value.key and just have to be that order. And then what you need to do is then you have to do v bind. Actually, v bind is just value equal to state. Okay, and so this state will be here. That will be these values for different properties. And this v bind value is similar to what we did here. Here we're setting each one explicitly. Here we just says using whatever element values you can get from this one. And for the option itself, we're gonna just display the key. Obviously, you can display state here as well, and it will then show the different states. Oh, okay, states here. You can see now. I mean, because I'm displaying the state, that's why I'm getting Alabama or Arizona. And if I see as examples using the lecture slides, I'm using key. Then you can see now the state is AL, AR, or CA. And when you select one, the name, the value was binded, and bind value equal to state, or just return and display here. Okay. Okay. So this is actually the generated HTML. Let's see if it's actually, does it actually show in the browser? And as we mentioned before, you can't, the actual source code to run in the browser cannot contain something like say v model or v4 or v bind value. So these has to be translated. So if we look at this one here, and we see the element, it actually does not translate anymore. Yeah, okay. So what I did is I actually selected the current list on the page, and you can see here is actually generated the HTML code. You can see value equal to the value in the view property, and that's the key, and they generate 4. So you have 4 in the states, you have 4 here, you have 50, and it was 50 will be generated here. So that's a better way to dynamically generate the options for the drop-down list. Okay, and you don't need to have key. And so let's look at this example quickly. And let's say you have an array called this, also called the states, and you have these ones. And then you can just say v4 states in states, and only using states, not using key, and it will still display everything. Okay, in our example, it's quite simple. We can do something like that as well. Actually, already did. So if we take out the key, we just say v4. If we only have state and we don't need bracket, we just say v4 state in states. Value is state, and also we are using the state as the option for the dropdown, that option text. We go checkout, and you can see states. These are all the full name now. You pick one, it gets displayed here. So that's like the simpler version without using the key. Okay. Okay, and the last one is the modifier. We have about 5 minutes, should be able to cover. And so when you use vModel to link a variable to, link say view variable to any of the text input as the input field, by default, it always returns as a text string. In many cases, this is fine, but sometimes you don't want string. And then, okay, so that's why these modifiers come in. It will convert the type of value returned from the HTML input elements. Okay, so it says the default type will be string, even if you add type equal to number in the input field. You know, in the input field, you can force it to say, okay, I want to only have number, but still the values that view get will be still string. So this is where this modifier comes in. Okay, so yeah, the simple examples we are doing here is just to do this in the console, and there's JavaScript function called typeof, and it will tell you the type of a property, but also we can quite easily see from the view tools. You can see here order and the zip, and it's in 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's definitely a string because it is in a double quote. And what does this is called? Okay, web store. So if I say type of web store dot data, dot order dot zip. Okay, you can see it's give you string, but also, and I can use web store because I give it name to my view instance, and then dot order will be the order objects here, and finally we have the dot zip, which is dot zip here, which tells you the type, which is a string. Okay, and obviously you wanted to change that to number, because that makes more sense, and you just say vmodel dot number. So that converts the input to a number. So if I do that in the code now, so we'll say it's here. Where is the zip code? Yeah, vmodel dot number. And then if I do it here now, I do this again. Still give me string. Type equal to number. I think that's probably because I set this one here. Let's try again. Now it's number. So just to show you, it's not because where is the zip again? Radio button. Zip code. Let me collapse these ones. Okay, if I don't do this, and though I try to return, it's now also returns as number now. Did it change? Okay, I think that's a change now, and even without it, it will just say number.
What if you change the default value to a string and then check?
And the default, yeah, I think that's what okay.
I think it's picking up, and since the default value is a number, so it just gives you the data type of that. Yeah, maybe try to change her to a string.
No, if this one is changed to a string, obviously this will tell you it's a string. And even if you add zip code here and dot number, I believe, and it's still not going to change. It will still tell you string. So I think previously the behavior was, if you don't have this, it always returns a string, even you set it as a number here. Okay. Okay, there's other things, and maybe this is slightly more useful, and it allows you to trim the input values. And for example, it can remove the space and before and after the text string, if that's what you want to do. So if you use dot trim, it will remove the space before the kai and shu, and also afterwards as well. Okay, and that's it. So this will be the chapter 4 of the book.